Daf Yomi, Tractate Bava Batra, page 104a, top of the page, with the words Pachos Kolshuhu, Yinakeh, Yeser Kolshuhu, Yaksir, Hastama Kehain, Chaser, Hain, Yeser, Tami. And he gave him even the slightest amount less than what was stipulated. The seller must deduct the difference from the purchase price of the field and return money to the buyer. If he gave him even the slightest amount more than what was stipulated, the buyer must return the difference to the seller. The reason that even the slightest difference in value must be returned is that the seller specified that he was selling land measured precisely with a rope, but he had sold, but had he sold the land without further specification, it would be like he sold it saying that it is a beit kor, more or less. Ema Seifa V'im amar lo hein chaser hein yeser afilu piches rova l'sa o hosir rova l'sa higio hasitama kemida b'chevel dami al v'ha leka l'mishma mina. The Gemara rejects this argument by proposing another, completely opposite proof. Say the latter clause of the Mishnah, and if the seller said to the buyer that he is selling him a beit kor of land more or less, then even if he gave him 1/4 of a kav per sa'ah less than what was stipulated, or he gave him 1/4 kav per sa'ah more than what was stipulated, it is his and the sale is valid. One can infer the reason that the sale is valid is that he specified that he was selling a beit kor of land more or less. But had he sold land without further specification, it would be like he sold it saying that he was selling the land measured precisely with a rope. Rather, since the Mishnah can be interpreted in two opposite ways, no inference is to be learned from the Mishnah. Tashima, come in here. Come in here. Get proof from a Braita. Tashima. The Gemara tries to present another proof. Come in here, proof from a Braita. Beit kor afar ani mocher lach. Ke beit kor afar ani mocher lach. Hein chaser, hein yeser ani mocher lach. Afilu piches rova l'sa'a o Yehoshua rova l'sa'a higio alma stama nami ki hein chaser hein yeser tami hasam pirush shikam afarish eza beis kor shihi beis kor kigon damar le hein chaser hein yeser. Okay, the Gemara tries to present another proof. Come in here, a proof from a Braita. If the seller said to the buyer, I am selling you a plot of earth the size of a beit kor, or he said to him, I am selling you a plot of earth about the size of a beit kor, or he said to him, I am selling you a beit kor more or less, that even if he gave 1/4 of a kav per sa'ah less than was stipulated, or he gave him 1/4 kav more of what was stipulated, it is his and the sale is valid. One can infer apparently selling a beit kor of land without further specification is also like selling it more or less. The Gemara rejects this proof. There, the Tana is explaining a statement which should be understood as follows. When is the phrase a beit kor treated like the phrase about the size of a beit kor? In a case where the seller says to the buyer, I am selling you a beit kor more or less. Maskef le Ravashi Im kein ani moichelach lamali. Elo lav shmamina stamanami. Gehein chaser hein yeser. Dummy? Shmamina. Rav Ashi objects to this. If that is so, then why do I need to repeat the words, I am selling you 3 times? The fact that the Brisa repeats these words in each clause indicates that it is discussing 3 separate sale transactions, and not the 3 clauses. Not that the 3 clauses are all referring to one case. Rather, isn't it correct to include from the Brisa that selling a beit core of land without further specification is like selling it more or less? The Gemara affirms, conclude from the Brisa that this is so. Mahu machzer lo, maos, liapos kocho, shel mocher amrinan, liapos kocho shel keach lomrinan. With regard to a buyer who received too much land and now must compensate the seller, the Mishnah teaches what does he return to him? He pays him money. And if the seller so wishes, the buyer returns the surplus land to him. Because the sages said that the buyer pays money in order to enhance the power of the seller. In other words, the sages allowed the seller to choose whether to take back the surplus land or to demand payment for it from the buyer, even though this effectively forces the buyer to purchase the surplus land from him. The Gemara asks, is it correct that we say that the seller's power should be enhanced, and that we do not say that the buyer's power should be enhanced? Vihatanya, it isn't taught in a Brita. Shivas kabim mechtelakor. Oh, Shiva kabim. Oh, mechtelakor higio Yosher Mikan. Kofin esmocher lemocher es lukeach lukeach. But isn't it taught otherwise in a Brita? The seller gave the buyer 7.5 kav per core, less than what was stipulated, which is the equivalent of a quarter kav per sa'ah, as a core is equal to 30 sa'ah. Or he gave him 7.5 kav per core, more than what is stipulated. It is his, and the sale is valid. If the difference is greater than the amount, the court compels the seller to sell and the buyer to buy the difference. This indicates that we also say that the buyer's power should be enhanced, since if the buyer so wishes, the seller is compelled to sell him land and accept payment for it. Hasam, over there, can go into Havya Kira Vikara. Vizal Hashta. Damrinan le Iara Yahavli Kezula the Hashta. The Gemara replies here, in the Brita is not discussing a case where the buyer wishes to acquire the surplus land, but rather with a case where the land was initially, at the time of the sale, expensive, but now is cheap, and the seller wants to buy, and the seller wants the buyer to pay him for the surplus land according to the initial higher rate. In this case, we say to the seller, in the name of the buyer, if you wish to give me land and receive money, give me the land according to the current cheaper rate. This is what the Brita is referring to when it states the seller is compelled to sell. V'hatanya, Gemara raises the difficulty, but is it on a Brita? Keshehu no sein lo kishar shalakach mimenu, asum kigon dahavezula mikare le hashta. Gemara raises the difficulty, but isn't it on a Brita that when he gives him money in payment for the surplus land, he gives it to him according to the rate at which he had bought the rest of the land from him? The Gemara replies, there is a Brita. There, the Brita is referring to a case where the land was initially cheap but now is expensive. If, in such a case, the seller wants the buyer to pay him for the surplus land, he is compelled to sell it to him according to the cheap rate from the time of the original sale. Shim shi'arba sadan beis tisha kabin amrav huna tisha kabin shamru afil b'dika gedoyla. The Mishnah teaches as if the surplus in the field was an area required for the sowing of 9 kav of seed, and in a garden, an area required for the sowing of a half a kav of seed. Or, according to the Rabbi Akiva, an area required for the sowing of a quarter kav of seed. The buyer can return the surplus land to the seller, and the seller cannot demand payment in money. Rav Huna says the halacha that was stated in the Mishnah, that surplus in the size of an area required for the sowing of 9 kav of seed can be returned to the seller, applies even in a large valley which measures several kor. If the surplus is a significant plot of land equal in size to an area required for the sowing of 9 kav of seed, the buyer can return to the seller, even if the seller is less than 1/4 of kav per sa. In other words, less than 1/24 of the size of the field that was sold. Rav Nachman Amar, and Rav Nachman says, no saying shivas kavim mechze l'chol kor v'kor. He calculates 7.5 kav for each and every kor, which is equivalent to 1/4 of kav per sa'ah. As long as the surplus does not exceed that ratio, he is not required to return it, even if the surplus is greater than the area required for the sowing of 9 kav.